Great, thank you. And quadruple play, you're not a new member, you're a toddler. I think this is your second or third. You're starting to walk now.
Thanks a lot, Leslie. Good morning to the WAPA members in Gauteng. My name is Telecommunications from Kwashokoble, like what Leslie said. We are fairly new, but we learn a lot from this room. I think what brought us into WAPA is mainly the knowledge that we go out with every time there's a WAPA conference. It's very valuable. The discussions that happen here, they will just give what we refer to as a light moment. You suddenly pick and say, oh, this is what will move the needle forward. So basically what we do at Quadruple Play, we run our own ISP network in Northwestern Limpopo. And then for other provinces, we help other ISPs to set up their network in terms of Wi-Fi. So it's good news today that we hear the Wi-Fi 7 on the lower band of 6 gigahertz. We use a lot of Wi-Fi 6 in terms of our connective platform. So we run a hotspot system based on the PowerLinks product from Springs. Our argument is basically to say, if you stay in a state, the moment you jump out of your house, you don't become isolated from your Wi-Fi. But the reality of the matter is you step out of your house, you're no longer connected to the Wi-Fi. You don't jump into an island, but you jump to a certain operator's network. Most of the time is the MNOs. So our argument is to say, if you stay in an estate and it takes you 5 minutes to drive out of the estate, what if that 5 minutes you are still connected to the Wi-Fi same as the one in your house? So that's where we position our connective product to say, can we grab a few minutes from the MNOs? It's a very small portion already for them. It means a very small drop in an ocean, but a very big difference for our product. Even if we make 10 cents out of that, that's a lot of money if you multiply. So basically that's our space. And then if you touch the N77 band, we're a very big player in terms of 4G and 5G deployments. We deploy those networks across the region. So we have presence in Eswatini, Zambia, and Lesotho. We deploy a lot of this 4G and 5G technology. So N77 is very good news for us in South Africa because we only used Wi-Fi in South Africa. But until this spectrum is made available, we can now use the same to deploy the networks. Thank you.
I would agree with you, N77, etc. Plus the passport concept. You see it much in Europe. If you sign into the Wi-Fi at the airport, you go to your hotel, you haven't signed out and signed in again. It's one password across the network, and it's very effective. And you can make money, it's because it's a pure volume business. The only thing on the N77, and this is something I know my husband and I debate about this, how boring a marriage do we have? The issue there is the cost of the actual phone. Until we can get that right, I don't think we're going to see enough traction. As always, the costs are just too high. But there are some very clever minds working on this issue, and we're hoping to have an answer soon. Now, our brand new sponsor, Astro, welcome. I'm sure you didn't know what we're walking into.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Yuri, and I'm representing the Astro Wireless company. Maybe sounding like a little bit of a new name for you, but we actually operate worldwide for years already. We have like 100,000 installations worldwide. So I want to say thank you for this opportunity. It's a big pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, yours is slightly different because you are a local provider. So how are you actually adapted to the South African market? And if you're a brand new WISP starting up in South Africa, why must I come to you?
Thanks, Leslie. We spent, I think, the last 5 years since 2021 trying to understand the market and how the South African market is categorized and where players are concentrated. For instance, we focus mainly on fixed wireless, which is what almost everyone in this room is about. and then possibly which market or the market segment that we address. So we spend more time learning how fiber network operators, so maybe I'm sitting next to one of our friends from Vox, the fiber network operators, what do they do, where do they focus currently in terms of deployment, which is mainly urban and peri-urban. And then we realized, I think there's few players that play in the township setup. South Africa is very big in terms of townships. And then very limited players playing in the rural area. I think we had Adnots, for instance, sharing their story as how they are trying or they are working hard to make the connectivity of rural areas possible. And then when we started our SP operations in northwestern Limpopo, which is it's a 50-kilometer radius from a mine called Anglo American. They just changed the name to Valterra Platinum. So basically, that's the area where we started, and possibly is categorized as rural area in South Africa. We spent more of our time trying to learn that environment, what happens, the service providers around that. I think when we started was during COVID, it's COVID, yes, but I think our emphasis is not on COVID, but it's on the load shedding, which was stage 6 during that time. So our popular MNOs in the country during that time, their networks will be off literally every day because the batteries are stolen from their sites. So they only rely on commercial power. So the only thing that was surviving there was the WISP, because the WISP will build a network and rely on battery and solar panels, not on ESCOM. And one decision we made when we started was to go that route as well. We did that decision not because there was load shedding, but because the application process of getting power from ESCOM proved to be beyond what we can take, because we wanted the network to be live immediately the tower was up. So, but then that taught us a lesson to understand the rural market. So most of the time, what we then decided as quadruple play is to then work from that point of view, from the rural area point of view. So all the networks that we've built and we're running up today, they are from the rural area. And then when we set up last year the connective platform, I think it was after Springs launched the Power Links in 2024, we then realized that possibly we can also play in the space of the townships. We see a lot of fiber deployments in the townships. There are so much across the country. But as quadruple play, from an economic point of view, we found that the best place we can play in is basically providing commercial hotspots across the townships. And then, of course, we then extend that to public places like your filling stations. Leslie mentioned airports. We felt cheated by FNB Stadium on the 24, 28, when Orlando Pirates was playing Kaizer Chiefs. The stadium was fully sold out, and my heart was pumping to say that 9,000 would have spent 10 cents on our network if we had already deployed. So basically, that's what we want to achieve, to make sure that those venues like FNB Stadium or rugby stadiums or any other public space, the moment they walk in with their phones, they see a connective Wi-Fi name, and then because the phones will already know the Wi-Fi name, they will automatically browse even before they can even connect by themselves. So, and then automatically there's some revenue that will go our direction or our partners in terms of these venues. Thank you.
I think also, we're still talking about load shedding, and a lot of us have moved to solar, both in our homes and our businesses. But our dear late friend Jens put it the best. He said, if you think about the ESCOM system as the leaf of a tree and the veins, and then the veins get thinner as they go along, and those will be out to the farms, to the townships in the rural areas. So the more we're going to solar, the less we're encouraging ESCOM to feed those, and that leaf is going to die. So it's not just a load shedding matter, it's actually a matter of ESCOM has done itself out of a business. So anybody that's not looking at alternative power solutions is, well, whatever you're smoking, I want some. Fox, what is your differentiation in the South African market? Why come to you and not somebody else?
So, yeah, thanks, Leslie. So, we are a primary fiber provider in the market, but I think we realize that, fiber, there's municipality cuts up roads, things happen with fiber, customers want phenomenal speeds on fiber and they're happy with that, but what do you do to provide resilience to customers? And that's where wireless comes and plays a fundamental role in businesses' life. So to provide a customer with proper SLAs, and giving them the on time all the time, you need to back up your fiber with a wireless solution. Otherwise, you're not going to have the uptime. Can a business actually spend time offline? You can't, because if you are an online business, you can't afford to be offline anymore. So we cover a whole spectrum of services, which ranges from consumer, residential fiber, business fiber. We do satellite services. We do microwave wireless services to a number of partners. Satellite, we've got the old geo technology, which is still out there. People are still using it. We've invested in partnership with LEO technology, which we're rolling out as well. And sometimes we use wireless and LEO services out in the rural areas, LEO for the backup and the wireless as the primary, or vice versa, depending on the situation of the customer. But it's a hybrid solution approach. It's not just that one technology fits everything. It's like finding the best technology that suits the customer and ensuring that he has always on experience. And that's what makes us great, is providing that customer with ongoing uptime and a proper SLA all the time. And we even moved now into the home market with wireless services as well, because fiber is not everywhere. You get pockets in metros where there's no fiber. You get multi-dwelling units where there's no fiber. So you need to try and service those customers. And what works well is wireless services. The problem with mobile technology, if you talk 5G and LTE, you are constrained by fair usage policies and things like that. So it's not always the best solution, but providing a proper wireless solution to that end user, actually using a true fiber-like experience that you would get when he's a normal fiber provider.
Thank you. You're preaching to the converted, my brother. Tarquin.
Okay, so what are we doing? I think our biggest focus over this year is connecting east to west.
We're moving away from all the data being always in a downlink and not back to the internet itself, especially with AI coming on board and all the social media. We see traffic more or less going back to the past where we have a 50-50.
2006, WAPA was formed. First WAPA member, Namibia. And after a year or so, WAPA had its first AGM. 2015, I joined the executive committee of WAPA. So I collected the number of links that each WISP had, and I put them together in a report to ICASA. We had sold 350 million rands worth of 17 gig links at that stage.
They were saying that 5G brought speed, but 6G brings intelligence. A WISP is going to be able to give fixed wireless access. A WISP is going to give telemetry, M2M. A WISP is going to give over-the-top services like either geyser monitoring, smart agriculture, etc. This is where we see the future going, where we are now harmonizing the different wireless technologies that are there to give customers higher capacity in terms of bandwidth for backbone and also multiple functions with the device. And instead of buying a device for 3,000 rand or for 5,000 rand that does one technology, that same amount is going to give you multiple technologies in one box. This is where we see the future of technology going, at least as a company.
It's called AFC and it's already running in North Americans and many other nations already considering this use. So we believe that in the nearest future, maybe 3 years, maybe in 1 year, but we will see the AFC in use in South Africa.
Thank you. Now, I'm hoping, against hope, that you're going to give me the answer that the next 80% is going to be covered. Affordably.
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks to the WAPA community. 3 years from now is 2029. With everything that's happening, from a quadruple play point of view, we analyze where we come from, what has been the connectivity challenge. We try by all means, I think everyone from the WISP market will agree that we buy the most affordable equipment to connect the customer. Even today, the new technology has been introduced to us, which is N77. We're picturing it and trying to understand from the ecosystem point of view, how much will it cost us? For instance, that's a 5G technology. You might find from a South African currency point of view, you're talking about 3,000 Rand or above in terms of the CPE connecting the customer, and you still need to put a Wi-Fi router inside the customer premises. And you'll agree with me, we don't have that money in the pocket. You can't recover that money from the current revenue that we have. We're chasing all our suppliers, our service providers. We're trying so hard to have credit with the distributors so we can have more equipment. But we don't tell them in terms of what's our plan for the next 12 months, what's our plan for the next 36 months. Are we going to use Cambium, or we feel like Cambium is not on our side? Maybe we go back to Mirror and say, show us another vendor you got beside Cambium or TP-Link. What else can we have? So we don't give that roadmap from a service provider point of view. But then it's not our problem why we can't. We also didn't engage the end users themselves to understand, will they be with us throughout that time? And will they allow us to deliver the technologies that we deliver? So the biggest challenge which we have identified, Leslie, is we need to do one very drastic step. We are engineers by profession. We need to fire ourselves from leading these companies and hire growth, enterprise personnel who doesn't understand anything to do with Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, GPS, or any other technology that we talk about in this room and we're so excited about in this Wi-Fi. Someone who just said, these are the numbers, where are the assets? Do we capitalize the CP from the customer? And if we do that, for instance, that 3,000 becomes capital expenditure, it goes into the assets. Automatically, the balance sheet talks a total different line. So my take is for us to grow and cover this 80% that's unconnected, we need to rope in the users, make them understand that we are here to connect them and get them to participate. Most of these users, especially in the unconnected areas, they run something called stock fails, and that's money. And no one tells us what do they use that money for. Maybe we can just push them to use that money for connectivity, and I'm sure that's possible. All we just say is, bring that money you are investing into the same connectivity that's connecting you. So we tried that model, and we saw that that is possibly what can work when we work with them. So I think there was a comment about fiber to say, if you put fiber into the rural, to any environment or any urban area, the very same contractors you hire on the community, they will vandalize the fiber so that you can hire them to come back and put the same fiber. It's the same reason why in the rural area you go to a mobile operator's tower, you found the batteries are gone. It's the same people who put the batteries there. So they want the job again from the provider. So if we rope them in and work with them, and they are practically owners in terms of investment into the ISP that operates in their environment, there's no reason why there's a homestead that won't connect, because the moment you connect, you become an owner. So basically, we're driving that model to say, let's put inclusive investment. Let us not, as a service provider, put our own money. It's impossible. We tried that model. You cannot connect as much as everyone. And then automatically, once you have put that model, you will be shocked how much venture capital money is out there looking for us, but they just can't find us, and we can't find them.
You are certainly not wrong. And I always say, in business, look for win-win. Never look for win-lose.
I think is at stage 3 years, 5 years, we're going to see the next stage of big players being formed, mostly of course from our space in Liu. Liu can happen, we're talking category 1s and category 2s. When the Cat 1s are sort of played over, which is Starlink, Amazon and SpaceCell, those are the Cat 1s, we're going to see the Cat 2s coming in. But anyway, all of that is going to see a development in the industry creating technology and networks that you can take to the customers.
So for me, 3 years starts with a mindset of today, because today is all you can control. So the mindset of today is being open-mindedness or having open-mindedness, and we saw a record number of vendors here today. You have access to all of them. Pick their minds, pick their brains, and see what they can offer you, because these are people that are giving you solutions over 3 years from now.
I want to combine 2 points, so the 80-20 question, as well as looking at 3 years. So I think one of the biggest challenges of the 80-20, costs are going up. There's oil shortages, that's going to hit us soon, the memory shortage. There's things that are unavoidable, the rand dollar, we all deal rand dollar, so there's aspects that we cannot control today. And to connect the 80%, we have the money up front now, tenders or however it goes out. What happens once you've deployed? What happens once the contract ends, it's a 1 year, it's a 3 year? How do you look at total cost of ownership, especially in the rural? You've had the change of municipality or something like that. How do you make sure that our end goal is to connect the people and not make profits off of them? And that's the big 3 year mindset that we need to apply.
What I envision and I think what we hope for is one without excuses for the WISP, because I think a lot of us have been guilty of this, distributors included. If you look at competing technologies, I say competing, but complementary can also be another word. You look at what the FNOs have done in terms of capacity deployed and speeds offered, and it seems like we're busy with a race to drive down the cost of connectivity. And up until now, fixed wireless access, at least in terms of how we know it with sub 6, or I guess pretty soon we'll hopefully be saying sub 7 gigahertz, fixed wireless access hasn't really been able to keep up. But with how fast technology is progressing and how fast we're seeing transitions to new Wi-Fi protocols and that trickling down into the fixed wireless access space, I think in 3 years from now there won't be an excuse. We'll be able to compete on equal footing, at least in terms of capacity, with fiber.
If it was my own money and I looked at it from an outside point of view, I would say yes. There's massive opportunity. There's really, it's untapped. But, here's the but, at an affordable price. If the pricing is right, the market will flourish.
From my side, yes, with a bit of a twist. I think I'll set myself up as an aggregator of connectivity. Not particular a network owner, might own a piece, but definitely an aggregator of edge wireless technologies.
I am fiber.
He's not your investor, guys.
All right, so I like to make decisions on research. So based on that, I can look internally. I do see our own network. I also do see market research, and I'm lucky to have access to that type of information. So if I'm looking at where my capacity grows the most in front of me, it's wireless providers.
Yeah, what we see, we're talking price point, and what we've seen in the market with prepaid fiber is the $299 price point is something that people really like and they buy.
That $299 is the correct price for the township. I think from my side, I accidentally found myself in this space, being an engineer in wireless. But I'll still choose this industry. I'll still choose wireless. I think Mr. Qcon spoke about investments in the FNOs, the investors, what they saw and the funders in terms of debt. There's no major investment in terms of fiber rollout, major fiber rollout. I think we've seen the problems that we meet on the ground, the extortions, we see every time we try to enter a market in terms of the way it lives in terms of fiber. So even the time to deploy fiber is now longer than possibly how it was 10 years ago. So then the question is, we remain unconnected. We have a lot of households, like you mentioned, 80%. Then what do we do to connect those? So then there's an opportunity for a certain group to close that gap, and that group is this team we're sitting within this room on the wireless point of view. So basically all is required now is think growth, think how many connections can we have per tower, can we have as much as possible, can we lower the price to the 299 that Vox is talking about, and increase the number of connections. For instance, if you start at 1,000 connections at a time, that's almost 300,000 rand. Now you can use that OPEX to possibly run your operations, and then you can use it as a growth point to connect more users. So I think for me, the markets that are uncovered, they are practically looking for that lower price. And we have to go down to meet them at that demand and still make sure that we do numbers. So for fiber, I think you mentioned that, Leslie, to say the industry has been counting home passed, and they are so good in counting those. Personally, it doesn't make sense to me. Why do you pass a home and the cost has already been incurred? If, for instance, it costs you 7,000 rand to pass a home and you still pass the home, why can't you enter the home and say, I'm here to deliver connectivity, and drop the router by the living room and give them some free access, maybe for 7 days or something, test them and see if they won't take your connection. So my conviction is there's no need to pass any home. Let's connect all of them along our way. But if we can't, let's check what is it that they afford. I'll just give you a small snapshot. Last month, the Minister of Finance, he mentioned something that shocked my mind. That is increasing the elderly grant by 80 rand. And then I was now interested to how much. He's increasing it to 2,400 rand. Now, like in a household, if you have 5 people who are getting grant, that's almost money that we need for connectivity. And if we can convince them, then that money will come our way and less to alcohol, because that's what they use the money for.
True. You didn't answer the question, but since you are a new business, his answer is yes, because he's done it.
To understand the game of these antennas is you're not increasing the power of the radio. Look like this, and we're looking at this is the radio. So it's not a huge footprint on that 5G radio. I would like to invite up here Professor Luzanga Mfapi and Councillor Tabitha Faye.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tabitha Faye. I work at ICASA. So just a bit of an overview of how we got to actually having these field trips. So the usual regulatory making process is that we will publish draft regulations. We would then open up to the public to comment, and if need be, if we get enough traction, we will then hold public hearings, and then after the public hearings, we'll go back and do our analysis. What came out of those public hearings was just around concerns with the results, and so the main things were concerns with the results from the bigger players, the interference, perceived interference, the antenna heights, the directions of the antennas, etc., etc. And we felt that as a team, the best way to address this without having to do the back and forth was to just do a field study or a field visit. We were running 2 trials in 2 sites, so we then published a notice and opened up to everybody who participated in the public process to say, we will be running a field visit. We invite you to bring your equipment to test. We're also inviting the incumbents in these banks to bring their equipment and test for any interference and test the veracity of our trial results. And just for us to engage and to see that this can work going forward. That bit of just public consultation and actually going onto the ground has helped us move a lot faster in getting these regulations off the ground. So we did this in the beginning of this year in January, last week of January, where we went out to Duzuma and to Ikopo, where the trials were happening, and the incumbents came with us for both days, and they were able to test. And I think the biggest concern for them was in the peri-urban area, which was in Duzuma, just outside of Durban, or yeah, really, it is in Durban. So we were able to then test the site in Duzuma. We happened to go on probably the hottest day in Durban.
It was bad.
We were drenched. It was a hot day, but we managed to test. We also visited sites where end users were using and had been using this, I think, for the past 3 months or 8 months. Yeah, so for almost 8 months that they had access to the equipment and they were using the equipment, and we got to hear from them what their experience of the equipment has been. So I think I'll stop there with the overview and I'll let Luzango come.
Let the good doctor go.
Yes.
Thank you, Program Director, and thank you, Councillor. Maybe to add on, okay, I'm Luzango from CSR, I think Paul has already introduced me. Maybe to add some maybe other bits and pieces which Councillor was talking about. I think the real challenge that we are facing during the drafting and the eventual publication of the draft regulations was the trust from the incumbent operators. And here we're talking about your satellite service providers, the likes of MultiChoice and the like, who they couldn't believe that their receivers, because in satellite broadcasting satellite, most of the challenge is where do you find the location of the receivers, because they're passive. And it happened that in our region, IT Region 1, where we belong, in Africa we use a lot of satellite compared to other countries, in the UK and Europe. Of course they do use satellite, but we tend to use it more in African countries. So there's a proliferation of satellite receivers. And unfortunately, from the regulatory point of view, there's no requirement for operators to list locations of their end users. So there's no database where you find location of receivers. And these receivers, they're passive. So the challenge was, how do you convince the operators that their end users would be protected from harmful interference in this subband? Yeah, so as Councillor mentioned, those were big debates, particularly in urban areas. I think Paul mentioned something here when he was displaying the slides. There was a graph which shows the level of deployment of users in urban and rural areas. Majority of receivers actually are in urban areas, and they're concentrated in these major places like in Gauteng, Cape Town, and Durban. So how do we protect those? Which mechanism are we going to use to protect them, and so forth? So then I think the process before, the process which unfolded before we even went to the trial was to run simulations using best practices and ITU recommendations. So of course, we as CSR supported ICASA to run those simulations, and then industry stakeholders were invited also to do the same, to validate the models that were used by ICASA. So that exercise took place, and then that trip now to KZN, where those two 5G networks were deployed in the ISFR subband 1. Of course, I'll talk about it. There's a difference between ISFR 1 and 2. The N77 pole you're talking about is ISFR 1. Yeah. And the famous Wi-Fi 6 is in lower 6 gigahertz, the ISFR 2. And there's a clear distinction between those two. The ISFR 2 has already been regulated in a bit, because currently the regulations allow it to be used for low power indoor type of deployments for Wi-Fi like WLAN networks. So these innovation spectrum regulations, they are meant to extend or to allow outdoor deployment with standard power. Otherwise, I think some of you or most of you are already using Wi-Fi 6 in one way or another. But here now we are going to get a chance to use more power and deploy outside. And it will continue to be a licensed, unlicensed deployment. But the ISFR 1, IS is Innovation Spectrum Frequency Range 1 and 2. Is the N77 from 3.8 to 4.2, where 5G-like or 6G-like or IoT-like technologies can be deployed. And there is a lot of those satellite deployments as compared to ISFR 2. And the rules of the game there are a bit different in terms of allowed power levels and so forth.
So we are publishing the final regulations at the end of this financial year, so 31st of March. We are hoping that we will get them out on the 31st of March, and those will be the final regulations that will then be pending implementation. The only thing that stops them from being implemented is just us then finalizing what the implementation framework will look like for the USSP, which is what you were asking. And that really speaks to, if my memory serves me correctly, I think it's regulation 10 of these regulations, which is clarifying what it is, what is in the purview or within the powers of the authority, and what the authority can then delegate through a delegation of authority to the USSP user. The way we see it is that we should be able to have that implementation plan done hopefully by the end of the calendar year, this year, which would then allow for ICASA to then start accepting that registration for users. We are hoping we can do it a lot sooner, and if we can, we will definitely push. But if we can't, my bet is on the end of the calendar year this year. The provision is there in the regulation that we could have multiple users, but it all depends on what the demand looks like and whether there is justification for us to have multiple users. Once again, multiple users means there needs to be some form of communication between the two databases so that user A, USSP A doesn't go and cause harmful interference, not knowing that there was an incumbent who had registered with USSP B, or whatever the case is. Yeah.
And as a sign of our appreciation on behalf of WAPA, and this is not the first bottle of champagne he's got from me. I've been giving them out to him over the years for a very long time. Councillor, thank you so much. Thank you.
ourselves are basically doing a lot of regulated consulting. Our biggest issue at this point in time is the World Radio Conference 2027, where the agenda for WRC 2027, the ITU WRC 2027, is very satellite heavy. The big issue there is basically unauthorized use of satellite systems. There's also the big issue about the equivalent power flux density limits that will be discussed at that conference, or at least has been discussed in the build-up to that. And then obviously a host of satellite issues with more spectrum in the Q and V band. Q and V band is basically the 50 gig band, where satellite operators are looking for spectrum and so on. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of detail, I think, but is there any particular question that you want me to address here? We do a lot of regulated consulting in terms of licensing, market access, and so on. This short presentation here is basically what we've done. We've done what we call an economic impact study on the 15, 16 SADC countries and so on, and how that add value to rolling out networks or more networks in our region. As you know, I think the IQ stats has been clear. It's about almost a third of the population of the world is disconnected or unconnected or underconnected. In Africa, especially in Africa, our regulatory frameworks are outdated. They cater, at the moment, they cater for a geostationary satellite system that has been developed about 30 years ago. And I think this is one of the big challenges that we're facing in our space at this point in time.
Okay, Peter, thank you so much, as always. We always like having you at our events, as you know, and just a special thank you. Thank you. Peter Zimmery, now working for Zimmery Consulting.
Celebrate our 20th. It's quite something for an NGO to survive that long. But we've grown in those 20 years, and now hopefully we do represent you guys as a body to the powers that be. So thank you so much for joining us. And now it's beer o'clock.